got these new microphones, which many of you might know. And so I'm just trying out some different styles of videos, throwing some stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And so the plan for today's video is a very relaxed, just laid back chat with you guys, basically. A face-to-face talk. And I've got over here some tea in my new favorite mug, my Overwatch mug that I got for Christmas. It's a nice tea. This is a nice big mug too. It looks really huge because it's close to the camera right now. I can't tell if it's in focus, but this is the other side. And it's got in it a nice, I think it's called African Nectar Rooibos tea. It's like an herbal tea, caffeine free, and I like it a lot. So, I'm just going to be sitting here, sipping that, and chatting with you guys about some appropriately nerdy stuff. It's an exciting time to be a games hardware enthusiast right now, or a gamer in general, I guess, but specifically if you're into the hardware side of things, because there have been a couple of neat releases and announcements recently. So I was thinking today we could talk about the Switch, of course, the Nintendo Switch, which is Nintendo's brand new console, which I don't have, by the way. If I had one, I'd be doing a video with it right now. And I've had a few of you already request Zelda Breath of the Wild videos, and there's a good chance, a very good chance, that I will do some of those when I get my hands on a Switch. But I wasn't quick enough off the mark with the pre-orders, and I wasn't going to stand in line for one on launch day. I couldn't really, because I was working. And I know some people get really excited about that, and they camp out overnight, and they take the day off work and all that. I've never been that kind of person to get quite that excited. Like, I'm very keen about it. But I tend to sit back and wait a little bit. I wanted to read some reviews anyway. But of course, you know, they're all sold out here now in my city, so I don't know. You know, in classic Nintendo fashion, they have understocked at launch, and I don't know when supply will catch up to demand. It could be a while. But anyway, so we'll talk a bit about the Switch, and I'll talk a bit about Zelda Breath of the Wild. And then there are two other things I'd like to talk about today, and they are number one, AMD's new Ryzen processors, which are a new line of CPUs from AMD, and for the first time in many, many years, they are now competitive again just announced the GTX 1080 Ti, which is going to be their new ultra high-end graphics card. And yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I've spent the last 5 minutes here talking about what I'm going to tell you about. So now let's talk about it. Let's start off with the Switch, because that seems to be on everyone's mind right now. Understandably. The Nintendo Switch is a brand new console from Nintendo. It is Nintendo's 7th console or something like that. If you count handhelds. Is that right? No, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, whatever. It's the latest one. And now I'm trying to count the consoles in my head. There's more than 7 for sure. Maybe 7 home consoles, but I thought I read somewhere. SNES, 64. Wii U, 6, whatever. So, anyway, it's neat because if you've been living under a rock and you don't know this, it's both a console intended to hook up to your TV as well as a handheld console or system, a portable system, in the tradition of the Game Boy Advance, DS, 3DS, and all that. And this is a new move for Nintendo. In fact, it's the first time anyone's really done this in the console space at all. And so the gist of it is, it's a tablet with controllers that kind of go on either side, sort of clip on, and then you can slide those off, and you can take just the tablet part, which is about 6 inches diagonal, I think, 6 to 7, and you can just plunk it into a dock, and then presto, the game's playing now on your TV that the dock is hooked up to. And this is something that makes a lot of sense for Nintendo to do. From the standpoint of the kind of games they sell and where they are in the market, it makes sense, for one, because Nintendo has always had a strong portable system, in addition to a home console designed to be hooked up to the TV. Ever since the original Game Boy, they've done that. And that's been great. It's served them well, and their handhelds have been undoubtedly the best on the market for many, many years. But it does mean that they split their product stack. Basically, they have to make games specifically for handheld and games specifically for home consoles. And that means that, and they're splitting their player base as well. People who just have a handheld can't purchase games for the home system, obviously, and vice versa. So it makes a lot of sense for Nintendo to unify their product lines into one single console, and that is the Nintendo Switch. And I think that may have been a large motivator for them, one of the driving factors behind the Switch's design. But it also makes sense just now, in terms of where people are at in their device usage. Because now tablets, and especially smartphones, are absolutely ubiquitous. They are everywhere. And people expect to be able to have sort of first-class AAA gaming experiences on those singular device that functions both talk to your TV and portably. More people are gaming on the go than ever now. So, it makes sense from that perspective. Anyway, so, like I said, I would love to have an actual Switch here to show you guys to do an unboxing with. And you can bet that in the not too distant future, hopefully, I will do an unboxing video with a Switch. But it's just going to be a matter of when I'm able to get my hands on one. And hopefully that's not too very long. But in terms of the hardware itself, I've watched some videos, read some reviews. I watched a teardown video that showed the guts of the thing, and Nintendo hasn't been very forthcoming with what they're putting inside the Switch. We know that it's an Nvidia system on a chip design, an SoC, and it is a custom version of Nvidia's Tegra architecture. And this particular chip is based, it sounds like the graphics core is based on the slightly dated Maxwell design, which is the same architecture found in my video card, actually on my desktop, my GTX 980 and the GTX 900 series in general. Was based on the Maxwell architecture, and it was a big step forward from the previous Kepler in terms of power efficiency and such. But the current hotness, the GTX 10 series, is based on the newer Pascal architecture, and Pascal is yet more efficient, in fact, remarkably more energy efficient than Maxwell, and of course faster and all that. So I guess what we get from that is that the Switch isn't a massive graphics powerhouse, and it's not going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Xbox One or PS4 in terms of graphics. So I hope people weren't expecting that, but really nobody should have been, because that's never Nintendo's strategy. So that's the story. With the graphics, I don't know what clock rate it's running at. I don't know how much VRAM it has access to. I don't know any of those things. I'm not sure anybody does yet, because Nvidia, or neither Nvidia nor Nintendo have been forthcoming with those details, and I don't think they will be. I don't think we'll ever hear that from them, but somebody will figure that stuff out sooner or later at home. But beyond the Tegra SoC, the machine is running with 32 gigabytes of onboard flash memory, which is another sticking point that some people have been a little bit upset about, because that's not very much when you consider that some of the games that have already been announced for the platform are, I think at least half of that. In fact, I think some of them might even fill that storage space entirely. Now, of course, well, for one, about a quarter of that space is taken up by the operating system of the tablet, so a good chunk of it is already off limits to users. But game cards, of course, if you buy a physical copy of a game, they don't install to the onboard memory. They just run off the cart, and so they take no space, except for maybe patches and things, I'm not sure. And the saving grace is that the Switch comes with a micro SD slot, which will allow for the memory to be expanded up to 128 gigabytes additionally. Which is pretty good. That's reasonable. And micro SD cards are cheap these days. You can probably get a 128 gigabyte card for, I don't know, 50, 60 US dollars or something. So, that's good. What else to say about this system? There's a lot to talk about. Evidently, and I'm sure many of you actually have your hands on one of these right now, so you can let me know what you think about it in the comments. But evidently, it does its core thing really well, which is being both a home console and a portable. That process, that transitioning from docked to undocked and then taking it with you is apparently quite seamless and works quite well, which is good to hear that the core conceit of the console was executed upon successfully, because that's something of great interest to me. I really like that dual modality, and I think I'll end up playing a lot of it, for instance, in bed. That's where I usually play my 3DS, is like before bed, just laying in my bed. And I gather that the Joy-Cons are alright, although not amazing, maybe. Lots of people have complained a bit about hand cramping and slightly awkward placement of buttons. Like, I think it's really odd that the plus and minus buttons on the Joy-Cons. The Joy-Cons, by the way, are those controllers on either side that snap to the tablet or slide on. The plus and minus buttons are in a very awkward spot right near the top, where you sort of have to move your whole hand to get them. And of course, if you take each Joy-Con off, you can use each one as an individual mini controller, and you can do like two-player games on one Switch. And people have been saying that they're quite awkward in that configuration. Like, again, small and hand crampy. And one of them in particular feels very awkward. I think it's the left controller. Feels weird because of where the stick is. And how that changes your grip when you're holding it horizontally in hand. But all that stuff aside, by and large, the reviews have been fairly favorable. And it sounds like people are enjoying the system. And, there's a sort of a handful of little sticking points and annoyances that add up to be unfortunate but not a deal breaker. And those are the kind of things that I expect Nintendo to iron out in future hardware revisions, because that's exactly what Nintendo has done in past. If you recall, both the DS, the original DS, and the 3DS launch models had a handful of issues. Well, the original DS was god-awful ugly, for starters. That thing is hideous and bulky. But through successive design iterations and refinements, Nintendo really brought those handhelds to the point where they needed to be. The 3DS XL was a big step up in many ways over the original 3DS launch, and then the new 3DS was yet again another refinement and improvement upon that. And the DS Lite was a big improvement upon the original DS, and then there was the DSi, which further refined it. So that is a very Nintendo-like solution for their handheld devices. surprised at all to see a hardware revision or two on the Switch in the coming years. Maybe 2018, 2019, you know. Of course, that's not much consolation to people who have them right now and who are suffering with those annoyances. I've heard of other things like issues with the left Joy-Con losing tracking occasionally if it doesn't have direct line of sight to the docked Switch. Apparently there's no Bluetooth support on the console, which is strange, because people have Bluetooth headphones these days, right? Seems like something you'd want to have in 2017. Evidently there is no way to back up or transfer your saved games to another Switch, or just back them up in case you break it or lose it or something like that. Not possible right now. And with a game like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is this epic sprawling thing, you'd really like to have a way to back up or transfer your saves, I imagine. And that seems like a major oversight. But all that aside, like I said, reviews have been generally quite positive. Buzz and user responses and opinions have been quite positive. I gather that the screen, although it's only 720p, looks quite nice, and because it's at 720p, that reduces the load on the graphics processor, and so you end up with a strange situation where, for instance, again, going back to Zelda, which we'll talk about more in a moment, docked, it runs at 900p, and upscales to 1080p on the TV, and you get some slowdown at that resolution because of the increased rendering load. Whereas on the console, in handheld mode, running natively at 720p on the built-in screen, it's apparently actually a much smoother experience, and still looks pretty darn good, thanks to the relatively higher pixel density of the smaller screen. So, gosh, is there anything else I want to say about the Switch? Probably, but we'll leave it at that for now, because I've talked about it for like 20-25 minutes now. So, let's talk a little bit about Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is the newest game in the Zelda franchise. It is a launch title for the Switch, and it was originally developed for the Wii U, actually, but they missed their launch window and ended up essentially porting it to the Switch, and now it's a launch title on the Switch, which is exactly, if you recall, what happened with Twilight Princess. Actually, it was originally developed for the GameCube, and there was a GameCube version of it released, but it also became more of a Wii game. It was released simultaneously on the Wii, and I think that's where most people played it and had those funny motion controls and all that stuff. So, in the grand tradition of Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild comes to us from a previous generation, but to look at the game, you wouldn't really know it, because I think the artistic direction is lovely. It's really beautiful just from watching videos. Technically, it's got some issues, like there's a lot of aliasing and pixel crawl going on. The texture filtering looks pretty horrid. But I think the art direction shines through all that with this lovely sort of watercolor, painterly look that just looks so great in motion. And is sort of a new thing for the Zelda series. We've never seen a game that looks quite like this one, but the biggest departure is in all kinds of gameplay elements. This really does deviate quite boldly from the Legend of Zelda formula. You know, those of you who've played the series over the years, you know that there is a very predictable formula that Zelda games follow. You know, do the dungeons, get the items, you know, get your boomerang, your hookshot, your arrows, all that kind of stuff. And this game really breaks that mold by being a big open world adventure that lets you kind of go about it the way you want, and it is very much designed in the spirit of exploration. And I am so looking forward to getting my hands on it, because it is exactly the kind of game that I love. I love Zelda, and I love open world adventures, of course. Skyrim being, you know, in the Elder Scrolls series being one of my favorite series of all time. And I gather that the designers did in fact gain a lot of inspiration from Skyrim for this Zelda game, and it really does show. And so I think that's so cool and very brave of them to take the Zelda series in that direction and to renew or reinvent the formula, which was honestly starting to feel a little bit stale, I thought, anyhow. He's getting a little bit cold. So, what I understand from reading some reviews and user opinions, and what has me the most excited about trying out Breath of the Wild, is that it really successfully captures that spirit of adventure that a lot of people felt, well, depends on when you started playing, but going back to, well, I guess Ocarina of Time for me was the first Zelda game where I felt that sense of openness and possibility in a lot of ways. Even though it wasn't really an open game per se, it wasn't open world because open world games didn't exist then, but it was more so than any game I had played before that. And I remember reading an interview with Shigeru Miyamoto, who was the creator of Zelda, of course, quite some time ago, where he was talking about his motivations and inspirations behind some some of it on the channel. I can tell you that right now, but I will not likely do a full playthrough with it because I think that would be committing to dozens and dozens of hours, which is just too much of a time commitment on a channel like this. I like to keep my content varied and different, diverse. So, but you will see at least some of it at some point in the hopefully not too distant future. Okay, so let's get on to some of the more nitty-gritty PC gaming, hardware nerd stuff. I know a lot of you game on PC, and I know a lot of you don't as well, so this might just be gobbledygook or totally not of interest to a large fraction of you. But that's okay. Maybe it'll just put you to sleep. That's the idea, after all. So, let's first talk about Ryzen. Ryzen are AMD's new CPUs based off their brand spanking new Zen architecture. And for those of you who follow gaming hardware, PC gaming hardware, you will know that AMD hasn't really been competitive in terms of performance, and in sort of the middle to high-end portions of the market, at least in terms of gaming, for a very long time now. Really, it's been like, well, since Intel came out with the Core I series, which was, 2011, 2010 now. But even before that, the Core 2 series, you might remember, which I think debuted in 06 or 07, was still kind of stomping all over AMD at the time. So it's been like a decade that they've been the underdog in terms of the middle and high-end processor segments. And in that time, Intel has made some great strides, but in recent years, they've become quite stagnant, I guess. They've been resting on their laurels, and innovation in the CPU sector has really slowed down, at least in the x64 sector. Of course, there's still a lot of competition going on in the ARM type ARM-style processors. I don't know what ARM architecture for like mobile, for phones and tablets and things, but or a lot of growth going on there anyway. But we've only seen sort of incremental improvements, generation upon generation, with Intel's latest CPUs. We're looking at changes of 10, 15% maybe performance increase at a given price point, generation over generation. And that's not very compelling, as a gamer. It means that really you can still get away with like a Sandy Bridge processor from 2012 pretty comfortably in a lot of modern games, because it just the power hasn't changed that much since then. So anyway, this is AMD's first all brand new architecture in 5 years at least. Before that, they were working on their bulldozer architecture, which never amounted to much. And I know I'm gonna get some fanboys in the comments here who are like, "Oh, AMD's always been competitive," or screw Intel, or whatever. Or the opposite of Intel fanboys saying Ryzen sucks and all that. It's fine to pick favorites and whatever, that's cool, but I've always been pretty agnostic, or pretty unbiased, I guess, when it comes to buying my PC gaming hardware. I buy what gives me the best best deal. And I will do my research, and I will figure out what my needs are, and I will look at performance and value, and I will make my buying decisions pretty exclusively based on that. So right now, or just a couple of days ago, AMD put out these new processors. They put out three of them. This is the Ryzen 7 series, which is their high-end parts. They put out the Ryzen 1800X, the 1700X, and then the 1700. And these processors are intended to go toe-to-toe with the best that Intel has to offer. All three of them have 8 physical cores and 16 logical cores, which is to say 8 cores with what is basically hyper-threading. That's what Intel calls it. But it allows 2 threads to be run on a single core, and each core shows up as 2 for software that needs it. So that's 16 threads of processing power. And the 1700 comes in at about $330 US, which undercuts the nearest Intel 8-core CPU by a fair margin, I believe. I'm trying to think. I don't know what their cheapest 8-core CPU is, but a lot. Anyway, it's a lot. Intel's got their Extreme Edition chips, which have 8 cores, 16 threads, but they come in at around $1,000, which is crazy. And anyway, AMD's top part with these Ryzen chips, the X1800, or the 1800X, I guess. I think it's the X comes after, is priced at about $500 US. So that's sort of the spread, the range that these processors are targeting. And so the first reviews have been coming out over the last couple of days, and the story seems to be that Ryzen is very good with productivity apps and rendering and anything that can use a bunch of cores. Surprise, surprise. But it's been falling a little bit short in the gaming benchmarks, and it's falling more in line with Intel's Core i5 processors. And there's a whole host of possible reasons for this. One is that games still aren't very well multi-threaded. They're not designed to take advantage of much more than 4 cores in a lot of cases. There are some exceptions, but there's been a handful of other discussions about issues with these processors that might be resolved through driver level updates, things like that. And the fact is, nobody quite knows why they seem to be underperforming a little bit in gaming. And when I say underperforming, I mean they're still doing just fine in terms of providing playable frame rates, very playable. It's just that from a pure gaming perspective, the value doesn't seem quite as good as Intel's current cream of the crop, like the i7 7700K, for instance. The i7, of course, is also clocked faster than these AMD parts and is capable of overclocking even further, and single core clock speed, sort of high single core clock speeds, are very important in gaming still. So that's part of the story, no doubt. And some reviewers have been suggesting, there's certain settings that you can turn off in your BIOS and things like that to eke, 5 to 10% more performance out of your Ryzen parts in gaming. But I think what we will see over the coming months is that performance gradually improves in games. But I think what we will see over the coming months is that as the Zen architecture matures and the drivers mature and games are further optimized for multiple cores, I think we will will see that the Ryzen chips start to look more favorable from a gaming perspective. I think they will continue to get better and better. And it just sounds like they were released just a little bit half-baked. They're not quite there yet. But all of that aside, in terms of, absolute performance and, and maturation of the architecture and the chips, what this really means is that AMD is once again competitive to a pretty realistic degree, which is fantastic because competition is what drives innovation and keeps Intel, for instance, in check with their pricing on their parts. So it's fantastic that AMD has come out swinging like this with this new generation of chips. I think they're going to continue to get better. They might not be the sort of barnstormer that some people were hoping they were. They're not a clean sweep. But if you're the kind of person who, like me, does both video editing, clearly, as well as video gaming, they make a lot of sense from a value and performance perspective. And so I think people like ASM artists, like streamers, like YouTube Let's Players, those kinds of folks are the ones who can benefit the most from a Ryzen chip. And if you are one of those people, and if you're considering upgrade or a new PC in the not too distant future, then you should definitely give those Ryzen parts a look. And AMD will also be filling out their lower tiers, or their mid-range and lower tier parts in the coming months. As we move further into 2017, I think Q2 and Q3 they're targeting for those parts. And that will provide some more pressure on Intel further down the product stack in their lower priced parts, and that's where things get really interesting, especially at the budget end of things. I love trying to configure really cheap but functional gaming PCs. I think that's a fun challenge working within those price constraints, and I'm really hoping that AMD can shake things up with 4-core, 4-thread parts in the price range of the Core i3s and the Pentiums. We'll see. It'll be interesting to watch. So, Ryzen overall, excellent performer in productivity apps and software and things like that. Not quite up to snuff in gaming, but certainly good enough if you have the reason sort of for a mixed use case like that. And really, I just hope it brings about a renewed era of competition between AMD and Intel and can drive that innovation and bring those prices down. Okay, well, this is becoming quite the lengthy ramble. I'm just chatting with you guys here. I like this, and I hope I get some good comments. We can have some good discussion. But this kind of thing is just, it's really relaxed for me. And I like talking, I guess. It's nice to have my cup of tea. And just having a bit of face-to-face time with you guys, which I don't do very often at all. I rarely get in front of the camera on this channel. But, in this kind of casual arrangement, it's kind of nice. So, anyway, the last order of business today, last talking point for those of you who are still sticking with me, is the GTX 1080 Ti, which is the latest high-end card that was just announced by Nvidia. And it looks like a beast. It looks incredibly powerful. They're quoting numbers sort of 35 to 40% faster than the GTX 1080, which is already a screaming fast card, fastest on the market. And clock speeds and faster clock to memory to compensate. And so, theoretically, at least by the numbers, this new card should actually be faster than a Titan X Pascal, which is very, very fast indeed. It comes equipped with a slightly oddball 11 gigabytes of GDDR5X video memory, and it's going to be crazy fast, and it's not going to be as expensive as some people had anticipated. Now don't get me wrong, it's still going to be very pricey. It's going to be priced at 800, I think, $799, or was it $699? Maybe it was only 700. I was reading this and I've already forgotten. No, I think it's $699. Yeah. And then the GTX 1080 has actually received a price drop to help clear some space for the 1080 Ti. And that is a lot of money to spend on any one single piece of hardware. I will not be getting one because I do not have the money. And my GTX 980 is still holding up pretty well. You know, it's still a pretty decent card. Yeah, man, that 1080 Ti just sounds like it's really, if you need a single card 4K gaming solution for ultra settings, it's going to be the card to get. And it's probably really the first card. I mean, the 1080 does well enough, but I think it'll be the first card that's really going to be able to push 4K 60 ultra gaming in pretty much all games and scenarios, which is pretty exciting. I still game at 1080p, and so there's really not a lot of reason for me to upgrade to any of these beastly cards. When I do eventually upgrade, and who knows when that'll be, I would really like to jump up to 4K, or at least like an ultra wide, like a 38 whatever by 1440, I guess, is what that sort of high-res ultra wide resolution is these days. I guess it's like 4K in terms of the horizontal, but less in the vertical, but spread out in that 21:9 aspect ratio. There's a few of those monitors on the market now, and they look really neat. So that might be the route I go when I do eventually spring for the upgrade, but those monitors are still very expensive. Those high-res ultra-wides, they're around $1,000 and then, or more. And then the 1080 Ti is up there too, so all total that would be a pricey upgrade, but that's going to be down the road. There'll be different cards out by then anyway, probably. But that card's going to be available in the coming week, which is incredibly quick turnaround from announcements to availability. And AMD is set to make some announcements in the not-too-distant future about some new cards of their own. And I think the latest rumor suggests that AMD will be talking about their new Vega cards and launching them as early as April, which is very, very soon. Originally, they were saying, the rumors were suggesting closer to June or July, sort of the summertime, but we'll just have to see. Time will tell, I suppose. But this is undoubtedly Nvidia's gambit, or their move to steal AMD's thunder. And the fact that the 1080 Ti is coming in at such a relatively reasonable price compared to what people expected suggests that perhaps AMD's Vega cards does happen. So, anyway, that was a lot of talking. It was a lot of tech news. It wasn't really news, it was just a ramble about all kinds of stuff. But maybe you found some of it interesting. Maybe you found it incredibly boring. I need to do a real proper long ear-to-ear video with these microphones, I think. Because I think they sound really good. I just love the effect. I'm sitting here listening